Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Rock and Roll Podcast. Check out this record. My name is Frank, and with me is my good buddy, Mark.
Oh, man. How are we going to get through this episode without pissing everyone off?
I know. We're going to piss people off for sure. And everyone, listen, thank you for joining us. We are syndicated via Redline Radio LLC. Redline. And you could also find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, be sure to headbang your way over to YouTube to see Frank's ruggedly handsome face and play my favorite game, which is what bridge is Mark supposed to be living under?
And for any new listeners out there, this is a podcast where Mark and I recommend albums to each other and review them, Plus, we have a wide variety of musical discussions, like our Spotlight series, where we dig into a band's catalog and see what comes out on the other side.
Or in our Verse series, we'll pit two albums against each other, and Frank and I will duke it out to see who wins in total stereo domination.
That's right, and be sure to check us out on Instagram. And now in our Facebook group, we like to drop additional content that will hopefully leave you wanting more of our musical goodness and, of course, Mark's random nonsense. And if you have a record that you want us to check out, drop a comment wherever you find us. While you're at it, subscribe, give us a review, a rating. So I say this, Mark.
Frank.
How are you, man?
Frank, I'm pumped, man. We're going to chat about all things Metallica, and I just couldn't be more excited. I have no idea how we're going to fit it into this podcast because we're going to cover a lot of ground, but we're going to have a really good time doing it.
Yeah.
How are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. Just excited to talk about Metallica, arguably the biggest metal group ever, right? I remember seeing the video of one as a kid, and A, I was scared, and B, I thought these guys are really good. So I'm amped, man.
Yeah, so for those of you not familiar with the mighty Metallistones, Frank is going to give us the lowdown on who's in the band. Frankie, take it away.
All right, so the easiest way to break this down really is to run through who played on which albums or didn't, right? The core of the band is James Hetfield on vocals and guitar, Lars Ulrich on drums and band spokesperson, and Kirk Hammett on lead guitar. You see what I did there with Lars?
Yep.
But Mark, that wasn't the original lineup now, was it?
No, in fact, there are two other members of Metallica to never make it onto a record. The first being Ronald J. McGovney. How great is that name?
Love it.
Who played bass for the first year or so of the band. Played a handful of gigs with them, only to be replaced with the now legendary Cliff Burton after quitting the band because of James and the next band member fucking with him too much. And that, of course, is the infamous Megadeth frontman, Dave Mustaine. Pretty sure I pronounced that right. Anyways, who was fired from the band before they could begin recording on Kill Them All. And replaced with Mr. Kirk Hammett, who, after just being with the band for a month, jumped in the studio to record Kill 'Em All. Frank, did you know that Kill 'Em All wasn't the original title of Metallica's debut album?
That's right, Mark. They wanted to call it Metal Up Your Ass. Not mine, your.
Yes.
Yes. But the label and distribution companies, of course, didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole, so because it had the graphic name, so Kill 'Em All was born. And this would lead us to the lineup for Metallica's first three albums: Kill 'Em All in 83, Ride Lightning in 84, and Master of Puppets in 86. Yes. James Hetfield, Lars Ulrich, Kirk Hammett, Cliff Burton, arguably the band's heaviest and thrashiest work. It was worth noting that Mustaine retains writing credits on Kill 'Em All with tracks like Four Horsemen, Jump in the Fire, Middle Militia, Phantom Lord, and of course off Ride the Lightning with the Call of Cthulhu and the title track Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, unfortunately, Cliff left the band and this plane of existence on September 27th, 1986, when the band's tour bus driver lost control. The bus skid and flipped several times. Ulrich, Hammett, and Hetfield sustained no serious injuries, but however, bassist Burton was pinned under the bus and passed away.
Yeah, horrible tragedy there. And after trying out over 40 potential bass players, including Kirk Hammett's childhood friend, this is funny, Les Claypool, the band decided on former Float Sam and Jet Sam bassist Jason Newsted. Supposedly, they made him eat a big ball of wasabi as an initiation. And yes, folks, I did say Les Claypool earlier.
Well, I was going to say it's flotsam and jetsam.
Yep. And I said flotsam and jetsam.
But how crazy is it? Just the idea that like one day some kid who went on to make no difference in his life went outside to play like football in the street, and like the two kids he was playing with were Kurt Hammett and Les Claypool. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you guys want to tool around, play with some go-karts or something?
Oh
Like,
my God.
no, Les Claypool and Kurt Hammett, we've got other things to do. Like, holy shit, dude, it's so crazy. Anyways,
It is.
with this lineup, that being Jason Newsted entering the band, they've released 1988's And Justice for All, 1991 self-titled Metallica, but let's face it, that record's just called the Black Album. And
Yeah.
And 1996 and 1997's Load and Reload, respectively.
Yep. Absolutely. And in 1998, the band released Garage Inc., a new album made up of covers. Then in 99, the S&M album is recorded with the San Francisco Philharmonic and released to critical acclaim. Let's fast forward to the year 2000, and the world hates Lars Ulrich, of course, for suing Napster, the file-sharing website. Everyone remembers that, of course, claiming that it was stealing his music and violating copyright infringement. They were the ringleaders in that whole ordeal back then. Then Newsted left Metallica on January 17, 2001, as plans were being made to enter the recording studio. He left the band for private and personal reasons, and the physical damage that he says I have done to myself over the years while playing the music that I love during a Playboy interview. He said this.
Yeah. So that brings us to Saint Anger, but we're missing a bass player. Frank, I haven't told you who the bass player is.
No, is it me?
What does Metallica do? No, it's not. I know that you guys think, I think he's over there. If you're watching the video at home, you think Frank was the obvious next choice. He wasn't. He actually wasn't. The band couldn't find a bass player in time for recording, so they let producer Bob Rock, who started with them on the self-titled Black Album, play bass. I believe he played like 2 or 3 shows too, but they never referred to him as a member of the band. Although I think he does get bass credits on the album. Whatever. This would also be the last record he would produce for the band, which is deserving after he produced this record because it was garbage. The album was released in June 2003, coming in, believe it or not, at #1 on the Billboard charts, but that's just because people saw the Metallica stamp and went for it. The critics absolutely hated it. Moving on, after 3 months of auditions, Robert Trejo, formerly of Suicidal Tendencies, definitely check them out, and Ozzy Osbourne's band, was chosen to be the new bassist. Although he appears in the videos for Saint Anger, he did not play on the album. Right,
which is to his benefit, I would assume. So we properly pronounce his last name how, Mark?
It's not oh no, I was doing Danny Trejo.
Oh no, I didn't. I was because I have to say his name next, so that's why I was asking you.
Is it Trujillo?
Trujillo?
I would like to apologize to this dude. I speak very little to no Spanish. You're a phenomenal bass player, and I butchered your name because I'm an asshole.
Don't worry. So anyway, with Robert Trujillo, if I'm even pronouncing the name right, first of all, he's an absolute beast. So they found the perfect person.
I think the J is supposed to sound like an H.
Could be.
Trujillo.
Trujillo.
People are going to put down your angry text. We're assholes. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. And
we're going to apologize for it.
And for the record, because I have an Italian last name does not mean I speak Italian. So
I think that's Spanish. So you're good.
Right, but Italian and Spanish are very similar. So, ideally, if I could speak Italian, then I would be able to converse with someone who speaks Spanish.
Ideally, yes.
Ideally, right? Ideally. So, listen, we're assholes. Listen, he's a beast, and we get Metallica's final form, and the band goes on to release Death Magnetic in 2008. Lulu with Lou Reed comes out in 2011, and Hardwired to Self-Destruct followed in 2016, and in 2019, S&M2 was released in theaters, but the band made no indication that they will be releasing that in any other form.
Yeah, so before we get into the official check out this record ranking of Metallica albums bit, let's talk about the one Metallica factoid people have skipped over or I made up completely, none other than the Unforgiven Trilogy.
Yes, I have to tell you, listen, I haven't really thought about this until you brought it up. The first song is a classic, and part two, I feel, suffers from being on reload, and it's a good tune. I basically shelved Death Magnetic, but then realized the number three was on it. And Mark, you know me, I love a good trilogy. And at one point in the script, I had this as God Trilogy. So
Oh,
yeah, I just wanted to state
oh.
that because it was a funny little factoid.
Yeah, so look, to be honest, I hadn't really thought a ton about this trilogy until a few years ago when I went back, and for whatever reason, I wanted to listen to Death Magnetic. I think, like a lot of people, after Saint Anger, I just wanted to let it go and pretend it didn't happen because I didn't want to be disappointed again. But I think that record's better than it is on the surface, and we'll talk
Yes.
about that later.
Yeah.
And having part three on there is definitely an interesting way to mix it up. Anyways, so for Frank, I'm going to propose we dig into each song and see what we can get out of them and see if they really connect. Does that sound good to you?
It does, man. Take away with the first
Yeah.
Unforgiven.
Let's see if I can bullshit this into a thing. And so the Unforgiven, I don't know about you, but I can still see the music video for
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, and I don't normally like to make assumptions, but I think for the trilogy, it's safe to say the main character, quote unquote, the young man in the first one, even though he becomes an old man, is representative of James Hetfield himself, or at least his psyche.
Right.
In part one, we get just that, James dealing with the cards he's been dealt and the world's lack of sympathy or forgiveness for simply being born into the station he was, and how he chooses to deal with it. You know, nice little caption of lyrics here just so that you guys can figure out what nonsense I'm gibbering about. New blood joins this earth and quickly is subdued. Through constant pain, disgrace, the young boy learns their rules. What I've felt, what I've known, never shined through what I've shown, never free, never me. So I dub the Unforgiven.
Brilliant, Mark. Got chills
Thank
on
you.
that one, my friend. Got chills.
Yeah, the delivery is seriously.
Yeah, loved it.
It's
So,
sex.
so we move on to the sequel, The Unforgiven 2. The title suggests this is a sequel, and the rhyme scheme doesn't help, but I can't help but feel that this should have been The Unforgiven 2, T-double-O. James is clearly present as the narrator, but the other is there's another here specific, and she. We hear James working through the difficulties of accepting someone like himself and struggling to understand that she can accept him for his demons. Here's some of the lyrics here. We got lay beside me and tell me what they've done and speak the words I want to hear to make my demons run. The door is locked now, but it's open if you're true. If you could understand the me, then I could understand the you. Or what I felt, what I've known, I take this key and I bury it in you because you're unforgiven too.
So the Unforgiven 3, right?
Yeah.
So aside from the obvious different intro from the last two, and actually he does a good job of not saying Unforgiven in the song on this track. I think many of us were afraid that he was actually going to say, you know, the Unforgiven 3, and then like whoever the chick was from the first one, they had a baby or something. But James manages to change the perspective in the first verse, referring to himself in the third person, looking back on his life, only to remember the present as he is, quote unquote, lost at sea. I think he does a good job tying these themes together of isolation, of servitude from part one, the struggle for acceptance and love in part two, and creating his character's lament and tying it all together for this third one, where he realizes he's the only one who can forgive himself. And here are just some lyrics to wrap up that theory. My sexy James Hetfield voice again.
Please.
How could he know this new dawn's light would change his life forever? Set sail to sea, but pulled off course by the light of golden treasure. Was he the one causing pain with the careless dreaming? So now he's going to refer to himself back in the other person as I, and he goes on to say, how can I be lost if I've got nowhere to go? In remembrance, I relive, and how can I blame you when it's me I can't forgive? And lastly, forgive me not, forgive me, why can't I forgive me? So overall, I think, the three work together. I think he does manage to tie the three songs together, although I have to say, I certainly don't think that was his intent when he wrote Unforgiven 1. And that's usually when people tell me that things were a trilogy. If it didn't start as a trilogy from part 1, it wasn't meant to be, so fuck you. You're just making sequels.
Yeah.
But I think he's done a good enough job tying them together that they do work in a Metallica universe of their own, like the Metalliverse, I guess. So, what did you think, Frank? Did I convince you?
Yeah, so I agree. I'm not sure if Hetfield intended for this to be a trilogy. And I remember when part 2 came out, I was like, okay, I was questioning. I was like, is this a concept? And, of course, that song being the bright spot, on Reload, I was guessing that for sure. The melodies and overall tone works as the guitar work is based on similar chord structures throughout them. Number 2 is in E-flat tuning, as Load and Reload were in those different tunings. So that prevents it from exactly sounding like the first, but there's definitely some similarities there. And I think it's overall a cool concept to have this theme be present in your life and then be reflected and built upon during various parts of your career or life. Listen, I'd be cool with a part 4 if they choose to do so. Again, I don't think it was initially intended like that, but when it came time maybe for that second one, they're like, well, let's build off of something. And I think it's a cool thing to look into. And I want to drop that on the Facebook group. So I'm going to put the 3 tunes there and let me know which one is your favorite, even though I'll know the answer. But, yeah.
Well, I'm happy to announce that in a 2012 interview, James Hetfield said he is officially done with the Unforgiven universe. I'm sorry, Frank. Anyways, dude, I've been listening to the entire Metallica discography this week, and I can't wait to just break it into pieces and talk about all the good stuff. And look, we're going to be honest about the shit because there's some shit.
There is.
Let's
Yeah. I mean, we're at a crucial and vital moment in today's episode, and that's the official check out this record ranking of the Metallica studio album. So this is where people are going to hate us, right? So we created a point system for each other, added our points together, and used Mark's brother Seth, his rankings, as the tiebreaker. And I really appreciate Seth for really giving us the idea for this episode here and this whole concept. But Mark, why don't you kick us off? So now this is 11 to 1. We went ahead and did this in our point system. So let the hate begin. Mark, you start.
Yeah. So, okay, to begin, and because these things are more fun to talk about, I'm going to start there. Lulu is at number 11. It's a big piece of shit. They shouldn't have done it. I'll get into that in a second. We will not be including either of the S&Ms.
Correct. No Garage
or
Inc.
the Garage Inc. or any of the live stuff. We wanted to keep it just to strictly original studio stuff. So that's why the Garage Inc. isn't in there. Because that record's actually pretty badass. Anyways, Lulu, the band had always been open about how eclectic their pool of inspiration was.
Right.
Among those things was the Velvet Underground and Lou Reed. Why, I couldn't tell you because Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground suck dick. Now, as a couple of old punks, people would think that Frank and I would feel differently. I mean, I just told you how I feel about Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground. I think they're vastly overrated. But Metallica, for whatever reason, agreed to do a record with Lou Reed. There's plenty of interviews where Lars talks about what a horrible recording experience they had, and you really feel that in the record. Listen, when Bob Dylan decided to take on the Heartbreakers as his backing band and go on tour, it worked. I think Lou Reed was looking for something a little similar in that and putting a big heavy metal band behind him like Metallica, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
That album sucks. I just want to make sure that everyone knows how I feel about Lulu.
Yeah,
I think it's got a perfect 0 rating out of us, by the way.
Yeah, and probably most people out there. And, listen, it was Lou Reed, I think, shortly passed away right after this, and maybe it was like a favor or whatever the case is. But Mark really, he he really highlighted it here well. It was just, the Lou Reed stuff, and then the backing band, and that backing band just happened to be Metallica. So I'm sorry that he had to talk about Lulu, but he's gonna probably be sorry for me because I now have to talk about Saint Anger. So coming in at number 10 is Saint Anger. Again, sorry about that, and Lulu's not too far off here with old Saint Anger. It's just not a good record. Too much turmoil going on. The documentary highlighting the making of the album or them during that time was exhausting. The audio quality is just bad. I mean, I appreciate, I guess, the grindcore effort. But
you just pissed off everybody who likes grindcore.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. But Saint Anger is horrible, and there's no other way to say it. I'm not going to sit here and talk more crap about it. It's just bad.
Yeah. Well, as the shit slowly trickles uphill, we get Reload.
Yeah.
So what you might have remembered as Reload was supposed to be the second half of Load. Load was supposed to be a double album, but because of recording issues, folks at home can't see I did air quotes, they got released separately for whatever reason. Right. So, look, there's a few high spots on this record. A couple of things that work. I really like Fuel. I know that it's kind of like a silly rock song, but it works. The Memory Remains is pretty all right. And the Unforgiven 2, as we previously mentioned, is on here. Yeah. That's it. I mean, we're talking about 3 tracks out of 10. You could have left the other 7 on the cutting room floor, cut 3 songs off of Load, shoved these in there, and you would have had an all right record, but yeah, that's Reload. Yeah. You guys guess what's at number 8?
Yeah. Let's guess. Pause.
It's Load.
It's Load. Yeah, absolutely. It's Load. I mean, listen, it's better than Reload, but that doesn't say really diddly poo at the end of the day. Hero of the Day is, cool, but Until It Sleeps, I never really cared for it. Don't even get me started on King Nothing. I know they were trying to go that alternative route at the time, but I mean, they fudged their own bucket by making such kick-ass records earlier in their career and now giving us this. It's not great. I don't like Load or Reload for that matter. A couple of choice tracks, like you said, here and there, but other than that, they're poor records.
Yeah, you guys heard it here first. Frank said that they fudged their own capoodle. Was that the quote?
I said they fudged their own bucket.
Fudged their own bucket, yeah. So, Woo, hot off the presses, ladies and gentlemen.
I know. That should be a T-shirt, right?
Fudge. It should be, yeah. Yeah, we'll make that the banner for the podcast, folks. So at number 7, because we're working our way slowly but surely up here, we get Death Magnetic. All this record had to do was not be Saint Anger or either of the Loads, and it would rank well. And it does just that. The sound on this record does have a little bit of that compressed feel that Saint Anger had. Really, Saint Anger just felt like they digitally shoved it in a tuna can and then tried to open it back up. This does sound a little better. It does have a little bit of a hint of that. And I think some of this, more important of a record than people want to give it credit for. For one, they worked with Rick Rubin, notably worked with the Beastie Boys, that amazing Johnny Cash records he did. Amazing. But what Rick Rubin's able to do is get the band pointed in the right direction, if nothing else, for this record and what were to follow, and bringing them back to a little bit more of that 80s style and sound. Supposedly this was when the band started writing songs together again as a whole, as opposed to just James and Lars. And it really gives Robert a chance to show off his capability to play the bass in a band that had really been lacking since Cliff Burton, his death. And that's not to say that Jason Newsted couldn't play the bass. It's probably more likely that they just didn't let him really get at it. And, this guy shows off all of his skills. Check out the song Suicide and Redemption and Tell Me I'm Wrong, because you can.
There you go. Yeah, it's really a good record, and I was impressed, especially revisiting it again. Yeah. Very good album.
It's got much better legs than it appeared to at first.
Totally. Absolutely. Next, we get Hardwired to Self-Destruct. That's the latest record, latest studio record. Pleasantly surprised here. I really like the title track, Hardwired, Atlas Arise, Moth in the Flame, Spit Out the Bone. I think it's a classic sounding Metallica album for the modern times. I think they're starting to gel too here with Trujillo. It's almost kind of like a second arc in their career between Death Magnetic and Hardwired Self-Destruct. Of course, if you get like another strong record after that, I think again it's that second arc, and with this other group of people that they're gelling with. This time, James Hetfield and Ulrich are put a hand in the producing side of things, but I think it's a really, really good record. Another track now, That We're Dead. Check out Halo on Fire. Again, strong. It's a new Metallica for the modern time, so I think it's a really, really good record.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I think that record is way cooler than people were expecting it to be, and really shot them back up. But we're at number 5 on the list, and
this is where it gets hard, folks. This is where it gets hard.
Yeah, there was a lot of like splitting hairs here and calling Seth and asking him which one he thought was better. Number 5, this record fucking rips Injustice for motherfucking All. Just in case you couldn't understand that, because I said fuck too many times, and Justice for All, which growing up I thought was Injustice for All. It took me a long time to read. I'm dyslexic as fuck. So there you go. That's my excuse. I think we're at the point where Frank and I are going to tell you that despite any flaws these records have, all of these records coming up are totally badass.
Yeah.
Now, comments about Jason Newsted's lack of bass on this record aside, this record is totally badass.
Yeah.
It's got Blackened, which goes into Injustice for All, which goes into Eye of the Beholder, into fucking One, okay?
Oof.
That's the A-side. Well, technically it's the A-side and the B-side because it was a double album, but it still hits so hard right off the bat. It's classic. You get everything from the galloping guitars to the thunderous solos, the big heavy drums, to this record rules.
Yeah. It's so good, and at many points during my sorting this out internally, I often put this, even if not 1 or 2, definitely up there. I mean, as we said before, these next records are going to be tough and they could be interchangeable, but this is such an amazing album. And I often wonder, I didn't see anything on this, and I maybe it is somewhere, and if there is anyone who could enlighten me on this, then do so. But the Al Pacino movie Injustice for All, I wonder if that was a little bit of an inspiration in reference to then the title of the album, although it's a common phrase, but I know there are also movie buffs and all those things. But such an amazing album. As Mark said, all those songs that go right into each other. I mean, come on, it's incredible. It's incredible. And the video of One that scared me as a kid is awesome. So yeah.
Yeah, the thing was like half an hour long.
Yeah, exactly.
Like 29 minutes of it was like gunfire.
Yeah, which they actually they bought the rights to that movie, so they could obviously play that at will at live and shows, and the all the little excerpts of it and all that stuff. So that's pretty cool. And I don't know what the movie is, so. But next one here, number 4, is Kill 'Em All. This is where it begins, right? What's cool here is this is punk meets metal and is done so well. It's that thrashy punk metal sound. The punk clubs actually wouldn't have Metallica play because they were too metal, and the metal clubs wouldn't have Metallica play because they thought they were too punk, right? Hit the Lights, Motor Breath. I love Motor Breath, by the way. The Four Horsemen, Whiplash. The whole record actually is phenomenal. I mean, to come right off the bat and do this record, especially with Hammett just being in the band for such a short period of time, 30 days, and doing this. Mark, I mean, I love this record.
Yeah, it's an awesome record. It definitely speaks to their early punk rock roots. It really shows. You can definitely, especially as we got older and started accepting that Megadeth was pretty cool too. Yeah. You can hear a lot more of Mustaine's influence.
Good point.
On this, especially on this record. But really, like, it's just such a cool record. It was so gritty. Like Frank and I were talking earlier, and there's this thing, if they had let Hammett be in the band longer before jumping in the studio, if they had pushed that time back, would we have gotten a different record? What would it have sounded like? I think it doesn't matter. Like, that was their first record. It was probably recorded, I think I read a story that it was recorded for $15,000. The guy who owned the record label had to mortgage his house to produce that record.
Oh my gosh.
But so they got it done as quickly and cheaply as possible. And we get just one of the most brutal off the bat thrashy punky records to ever come out.
So good.
Yeah. So number 3,
Number 3.
This is where some people are going to get their butts in a twist.
They are.
This actually ranks as my number 1 record. But it's okay because look, we're a democracy here. We talked it out. It's the Black Album. A lot of this has to do with with nostalgia for me. This was one of the first cassettes I ever bought. I bought this and Thriller on the same day because I like to party.
He sure does. I could vouch for that.
Anyways, so there's a lot of nostalgia behind my vote, but at the same time, this record is so badass, right? We call it the Black Album, but it's technically the self-titled Metallica album. It's the second release without Cliff Burton, and easily one of the most popular, personal and self-reflective albums the band has ever put out. They did change up the approach here. We don't get, as I mentioned, those gallopy, thrashy guitars of the previous albums, but we get 1991 music changing as it does. They're able to put together a big, heavy number that appeals across all kinds of musical spectrums. This thing was just an absolute beast. Metallica really managed to capture the success of And Justice for All and keep it heavy and just dug much deeper with this record. The thing put out 5 major hits: Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, Wherever I'm in Rome, and Sad But True. Plus, I have to tell you, for me, some of my absolute favorite deep tracks: Through the Never, Of Wolf and Man, The God That Failed, My Friend of Misery, and The Struggle Within. They're all badass. This record is angry. Personal and angry, and it totally rules.
Yeah, as Mark said, most people, this is going to be their number one, and this is their first exposure to Metallica, and I get it. I really do. And Mark mentioned Thriller, and this album did, I think, for their genre, and maybe what Thriller did too for pop music. I think it's Thriller was an album where maybe every song was intended to be singles. Now, I know not every song on here was a single, but 5 major hits is actually a lot, I think, from a record
out of
like
12
this.
tracks, man.
Yeah,
that's 60% of the records.
Yeah, absolutely. Hysteria by Def Leppard, I think, had 7 singles. We were just talking to earlier about how this and Nevermind were very instrumental in their respective genres. So this album did a lot. It did a lot not only for the band, of course, but it did a lot for music. And those 5 tracks too, aside from the deep tracks, are just they're classics. I mean, they're absolute classics. It is a phenomenal album. It did set the course for them to do different things, but no one could take away kind of what this album did. And again, I get it why it's a lot of people's number ones. But we also have 2 other albums here that were equally really cool, and that's how, I guess, as Mark said, this democracy works. So number 2 is just the album we're going to be highlighting below. I'm not going to talk much about it, but it is Ride the Lightning. Again, we're going to talk about it. I mean, this is really where they got things going with that metal thrash sound, as opposed to Kill 'Em All, which was punk metal-ish. But more to come on that below. But this is Ride the Lightning, and I guess everyone could guess, Mark, what number 1 is. Go ahead.
Yeah, so look, with Ride the Lightning, it's their second studio album, right? They've really got that time with Kurt to really hone the sound. But Masters of fucking Puppets, right? They've been on tour. They've been grinding. They've been working. Ride the Lightning was a huge success. You know what we're going to do?
Yep.
Master of Puppets, dude. And Master of Puppets thrashes.
Yeah.
This record doesn't just kick ass. It's scored almost like an epic. It's I'm getting choked up over it. Okay, look, there's clearly no Mustaine on this record, and you can really you feel like that meant something to the band. They no longer had that shadow to live under. Like I said, they had been on the road. They had really gelled with Kurt Hammett at the time, and they just put this absolute beast of a record together. I mean, we're talking about Battery, Master of Puppets, The Thing That Should Not Be, Sanitarium, Disposable Heroes, Leper Messiah, Orion, and Damage Inc. all on one record. It's just a beast. It's arguably their Number of the Beast. It's arguably there are very few heavy metal records, thrash records, that have the awesomeness that is this record. Like, there are very few that hold you the way this whole album just grabs you, and like you are on that ride. So I think most people are gonna say oh, you got the order mixed up. Look, you catch us in the right mood, this order might be a little different.
Yeah, totally. But you can't escape the fact that, listen, a lot of these albums early on, they were short as far as small as far as the number of tracks that they had on there. They were definitely going for the quality over the quantity. And again, you can't deny the fact that this album has the tracks that Mark mentioned. I mean, Battery, Master of Puppets, Walk
I literally
Along.
listened to the entire record.
Yeah, the entire record, and it's absolutely fantastic, and I think they were gelling on all cylinders there. It's an absolute great record. Again, Mark said, you could check us on another day, and maybe we'll have another list. That top 5 can be interchangeable, but as of today, hey, that's what this is about. So
Right.
we definitely, I'm sure, caused quite the controversy here with our listeners, so they could start typing their angry emails and your tweets and all that good stuff. But before you do that, guys, take a listen to our Ride the Lightning track by track review, right, Mark?
That's right. We're gonna fight fire with fire, Frank.
Yep. Here we go. Ride the Lightning. Let's do it.
Dude, I love this classical guitar intro. Into this
so
breakneck, blistering, palm-muted guitar and thrashy drums.
Oh.
The solos rips, and the lyrics on this thing. Look, I think all Metallica lyrics are fun just because, look, you can't take them serious.
Right.
Because otherwise they're just too dark and depressing. But if you look at them as theater and how ridiculous they are, they're perfect. And the music's just so fun and ominous.
Yeah, it's great. As Mark said, listen, I love the guitar intro here. You can hear right away the band expanding their musical landscapes. And a lot of this actually has to do with Burton. He knew music theory, and he showed Hetfield how to augment the notes and basically how guitar harmony works. And this is showcased here with that nice little intro. Then the storm comes in to basically rip your head off. It's actually the fastest Metallica song in terms of picking speed. And trust me, I know, because I was trying to pick to it earlier, and I definitely had some trouble. Hammett's solo just rips. Just an overall amazing song, and the ending with the nuclear bomb is a nice touch too. So that is Fight Fire with Fire. And then we go into the title track, Ride the Lightning. I like the dueling intro riffs here, and then it transitions to nice palm-muted guitar chords. I like the change-ups in the song. After the second chorus, we get that pickup at speed, and then the breakdown that leads right into the solo. Just really well thought out as far as the song structure goes. I can't help but have the lasting image of lightning like throughout listening to the whole album. Obviously you have the cover, and a lot of times I'll see a cover and that's the image I'll have in my head as I'm listening to the album. But you have lightning speed, Ride the Lightning, the song, lightning, from the electric chair. Just lightning is such a great word that represents this album. So I love the track Ride the Lightning. Mark, what say you?
Yeah, I don't know what I can add to that. I mean, this thing, it rips. Even its mid-tempo solos are badass. And of course, the tempo picks up, the solos get crazier, that double bass kicks in, and they manage to slow it way back again to this fist-pumping pace, all while keeping the energy electric. I mean, dude, it's awesome. It's Ride the Lightning. In this case, we didn't talk about the album cover earlier. We probably should have, but whatever. Frank nailed it, man. It's an electric chair being shot with lightning. Hey, what do you think this record's gonna sound like? That's pretty spot on. Books and their covers, right? Fuck.
That's dude. It, man. So amazing.
So track 3 is an absolute classic. Oh. It's one of the most iconic Metallica songs.
Yeah.
In my brain, but I say that, and they have 97 hits. So what do I know? It's For Who the Bell Tolls. Yep. You know it from the first tolling of the bell, right? This is so much cooler than whatever the AC/DC song about bells is.
Hell's Bells.
Yeah, fuck those guys, dude. Metallica rules. Guitars are muscular, intimidating, and menacing. Lyrically, Jane paints a dark and moody, war-torn scene that balances perfectly with this chugging guitar riff. Yeah. Classic Metallica, dude. This song is just so awesome.
And by the way, I love the yeah. So as Mark said, classic Metallica. Listen, it's inspired by Hemingway's poem of the same name. The intro riff is often confused with a guitar, but it's actually Burton on bass with distortion and a wah-wah pedal. So again, Burton does a lot of outside-the-box thinking that I don't think was necessarily being done at the time. I could be wrong with that, but I can't recall of anything like that. The chunky riffs just add the mood to the overall song, and his steady drumming really captures the euphoric musical composition right there. So just an overall great track. Then we get to Fade to Black. So this is the one song, that's right, I wanted to learn right away when I was learning guitar. The riff in the beginning with the haunting solo is just fantastic. This song it's I think it's really, really important in their catalog because it foreshadows what is to come with tracks like Welcome Home and One. This song would also gain the band some attention for its lyrical content because it's that of suicide. But James states that it was written after the band's gear was stolen and he felt down. Whatever the case is, listen, it's a classic song. It's a step forward for the band, and it's deemed really as the first, dare I say, power ballad.
About that. I
mean,
but hey, whatever. I mean, like, holy shit, right? What an intro to this song. It's so epic. This is a prime example of how Metallica can build their sound from a quiet guitar into this roaring heavy metal guitar riff of just like a juggernaut of a song. This thing grows out of the ground and attacks you. Of course, we do get more awesome guitar solos and note runs from Kirk Hammett here. Cliff, never to be caught slouching, really uses his bass to fill the sound of just deep thumping atmosphere here. And his proficiency as a bass player is near perfection, especially on this track.
Yeah, his role just overall, I know we mentioned him once before in an episode, but his role overall in the band, absolutely vital, pivotal to their overall sound.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there. I mean, it's certainly interesting that they were able to pick up and carry on. But let's do that before we get too drummed up and talking shit about Jason Newsted. No, I don't have anything bad to say about him. Track number 5 is Trapped Under Ice. It's so thrashy and daddy loves it. You never get more than a moment to rest from the stampede of drums and guitar. Hetfield does a great job with the lyrics and selling the experience, even if sonically the song is more like getting pummeled to death than Trapped Under Ice. But it totally works because it's just a nonstop assault.
Yeah. So a great example of a different type of building off from the first record, but on the thrashier side, it's super aggressive, it's punchy, and it's amazing how this is all just in standard tuning. I mean, we used to talk about this, I remember, in just in the band days when we just used to talk about Metallica. It's amazing how this is standard tuning, and it's relentless. It never gives up. Just an overall great track. Then we get Escape, and this at the time of, I don't know exactly the year that this was stated, but this is known as Hetfield's actually least favorite Metallica song, and it's because it's the result of the record company wanting them to write something radio friendly, and that makes sense, I guess, when you see the fierce nature of this record, and then you hear this tune, even with For Whom the Bell Tolls and Fade to Black, that they're slower in tempo, but this is definitely more intentional, and I could see where I guess that was the attempt to do so. Listen, it's an enjoyable song, not as blistering, but I mean, it's still pleasant to the ears. What would you say, Mark?
Yeah, I always thought this was the chill track on the album. Like, they just genuinely needed a break after everything they just put us through. It stays moderately mid-tempo throughout and lyrically feels like a continuation with what Trapped Under Ice was trying to do. It's a nice break, but possibly, and I think you nailed it, it's probably the low light of the album. As it doesn't have the same intensity as the rest of the record.
Yeah.
But by no means is this a bad song.
No, not at all. I'm not saying, yeah.
Yeah. So earlier this afternoon, I watched a movie with a close title to this. I watched 1973's The Creeping Flesh.
Oh, it sounds like the next track.
Yeah, which is Creeping Death. Creeping Death. It's time to pound your head into a wall with this headbanger's masterpiece. From the opening build-up, pounding away, to the signature blistering palm muted guitars, Metallica takes all the time it wants building up this monster. And let's face it, I totally lost my place reading, I'm sorry. And let's face it, this is the coolest song about Moses and the Jewish people escaping Egypt. Look, I love fantastical views of such events. And set against such a heavy and intense musical background. It's just rad. Who would have thought you could make Passover an interesting song? Metallica did.
A metal song, right? And I'm sorry, Mark, I was pounding my head into the wall because that's kind of, as Marvelous Mark over here stated, this song is about, of course, Moses and the Jewish people escaping Egypt. For the 10 plagues here are mentioned, and the band, of course, was inspired by watching the movie The Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston, which is a great movie, by the way. So it's a great solo, great chorus, great song. I mean, Mark really nailed it. Intense musical
Yeah.
background. It's really rad. Then wow, we get the closer, which is the Call of Cthulhu. And do I say that right, Mark?
Yes, and I'll tell you why.
Go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I was going to tell you why in mine. But,
Scallywag. Okay, let's save that. So for the closer, listen, we get a nice D minor chord progression here, which is actually the remnants of Mustaine. He would later actually take something similar and use this for the Megadeth song Hangar 18, which now makes sense actually hearing both of them. Really cool instrumentation here. Just an overall great example of 4 guys fulfilling all the musical roles in a piece of music. No needs for lyrics, as the music sets the mood and tells the story, and it leaves you wanting more. And honestly, I'm okay with that. So it's a really cool track. And Mark, give us a little background here.
Yeah, so supposedly the band titled this instrumental Call of Cthulhu and not Call of Cthulhu because they, quote unquote, feared the beast, right? We all know that Cliff Burton especially, but the guys were all big horror hounds and fans of horror movies, and this was meant as a tribute to Cthulhu's author, H.P. Lovecraft. I love this as the ending of the album because it's just like this thrashy opus.
Yeah.
We get the stellar performance, you're right, out of everyone, but I've always felt like this was truly Cliff's baby because you can feel his bass just pushing the direction of the song, adding such a dark and sinister tone. That said, the solo is totally kick-ass, and Lars doesn't miss a bit, or a beat, excuse me. It just rules, and it's such a badass way to close out an album. I think you nailed it. This song ends making you want to start the record over.
Yeah.
This ends and you're like, oh my God, I'm ready to just crush something. You just hit play again and the record starts. It's just such an
And that's
awesome,
okay. Yeah. And that's okay because you'll be like, yeah, I want to listen to it again.
Yeah. And it kind of ends in a way that the beginning of the album picks up from. So it's just very circular, just complete album. And that's one of the things that I love about records, right? When an album comes full circle, literally, and the concept of the album, it isn't just 2 sides. Well, this side's got some good stuff and this side's got some bad stuff. It's this whole overarching story and mood and tone. And Ride the Lightning has that in spades.
Yeah. Yeah, and you brought up a good point too, where it's like you want to start it over again. So that means there's replay value, and replay value is important in records, and it's me and Mark listen to a whole bunch of records, and there's a whole bunch thrown in our way, and there's a lot of new stuff we could be listening to. But look, here we are still talking about like these classic records that we've listened to so many times, and listening it to again for this was almost like listening to it for the first time. So it's a really, really cool record, and I'm glad Mark's brother Seth suggested this for us. It's a great piece for a band that was really hitting their stride in a genre that was gaining in popularity. It moves their needle from the first album and gives you little glimpses of what's to come. It's blistering yet somber, and one of their best albums, if not one of metal's best albums, and it's really a great album. Mark, what do you say?
I agree with you, Frank. Easily one of their best albums. Like we said earlier, this top 5 could really be shuffled any given day of the week, and any of the 5 albums at the top really could be the best album. I think there is a very strong argument for Ride the Lightning, for Master of Puppets, to be in those 1 and 2 spots. And I hope you guys will agree with us that we just laid it down on that one. Big shout out to the bald-headed dread, Mr. Seth, for this recommendation. We love you. We appreciate you. Keep up the good work. Keep listening and telling me when I screw up words. He doesn't actually do that. I just felt like rubbing it in his face.
Yeah, we appreciate Seth for really being a devoted listener to our episodes here. So really appreciate it, of course. And it was a good time. So Mark, let's talk about next week, shall we?
Sure.
All right, hot diggity dog, Mark. My buddy Don, he loves him some Great White. Now, I remember them from their cover, Once Bitten, Twice Shy, as well as, of course, the ladies in that particular video, which always raised my eyebrows as a kid. We were recommended to check out the band's third album, Once Bitten, released in 1987. So we're looking forward to it, right, Mark?
That's Chubby Wiener to you, sir.
Mr. Chubby Wiener.
I was 5 in 1987. I'm looking forward to going back. Frank's the hair metal guy here, and I'm pretty sure Great White falls under that moniker.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna find out. I'm curious to see third album, 1987. All right, Don. See what you're putting me up to.
We're counting on you. Actually, yeah, and Mark, I would say I do listen to more hair metal than Mark does, and a lot of it comes from my love of Def Leppard, in particular. I would say Hysteria and backwards through their catalog, not necessarily the stuff after that. They're a band I really took to as a kid. But my friend Don is really into the whole classic metal and hair metal and stuff of that nature. And I haven't really listened to a lot of Great White, if not any, outside of that tune, which was apparently a cover. So I'm looking forward to this. It's cool that we get an album like this because, again, I don't know what to expect. I don't think Mark knows what to expect. And
not at all.
Yeah, we're going to see what comes out the other side. So, of course, thank you for listening, everyone. If you have an album you want us to check out, let us know. Remember, you can find us virtually everywhere. Join our Facebook group. It's a good time. And, of course, if you're watching us on YouTube, hit the old subscribe button. Until next time, guys, I'm going to say this. Be well.
Bye-bye.